What is the most terrifying thing to happen to you in a well-lit and populated place? Was taking my kids for a walk in the park near our apartment once when a guy and a woman came out of the tree line suddenly and the guy said to give him my wallet and anything else in my pockets. He had some weird screwdriver/knife thing and I pushed my daughter, my eldest child, behind me. I was going to do the same for my son but the woman grabbed his other arm for some reason and my heart felt like it was going to explode for some reason. I suddenly forgot about self-preservation and jumped forwards and broke the woman's nose. I felt a sharp pain under my ribs and looked to see that the man had just shanked me, but at this point 2 other guys who had been jogging were running up and shouting. The police that patrolled the park showed up not long after that. I was sitting and trying not to bleed to death. The man had ran off and his screwdriver was still in me. The woman was on the ground crying and shouting because I had also knocked the top front of her teeth loose/out. The 2 joggers were originally asking the woman if I was the assaulter but the situation cleared up soon. I got taken to the hospital and questioned about the incident. There was a while when it looked like I was going to be charged with battery for the woman since it turns out she actually had a decently well-off family, was just an addict. They tried to sue me but it was thrown out and she was sentenced for attempted kidnapping. That I had a tube in my chest for 2 weeks after my surgery to remove the shank, but it all cleared up after that. Just glad my kids are safe. I was standing on a bus during London's morning rush. It was an absolute crush, nowhere to move. I felt a boner press into the back of me, so I shouted for the driver to stop the bus. He promptly ignored me that I had absolutely nowhere to go. I was trapped. And then this man reached under my skirt and tried to stick his fingers up my vagina, so I kept shouting what was happening. Nobody on the bus did anything. The driver wouldn't stop, so I struggled with this man who, by that time, was holding me by my crotch and licking me. So at the next stop, Warren Street, the doors opened and I ran. This man chased me until he caught me and put me in a bear hug and kept telling me he was going to rape me then and there in broad daylight. I threatened to stab him in the eye with my keys, in my hand and pressing into his eye, and he backed off. I kept shouting for people to call the police. I didn't have a mobile at the time, and people just kept walking past. So I ran to work. The police thankfully took me very seriously. They said that the CCTV systems on the bus weren't working at the time, so it would be difficult to identify my assailant. A week later, this same bus was bombed in July 7th. I wasn't on it because I was terrified that some man would do this again. That certainly isn't to say that I would have been on that exact bus at that exact time it was blown up, but I also know that the CCTV wasn't working, making it harder for the police to identify the bomber. It was the absolute helplessness I felt, whereby every person around me watched, but didn't do anything. Hundreds of people, passers-by, the bus driver, my fellow passengers on the bus all pretended that it wasn't happening. The terror of what happened in that instant didn't stick around, thankfully, but the mistrust of the bystander effect keeps me on my guard 11 years later. It also means that whenever I see people in trouble, I make a point of helping instead of standing idly by. I will not allow anything like this to happen to anybody else. It has gotten me in sticky situations, but I don't want another person feeling the helplessness that I did. When I was 12 years old, I was beaten up in a crowded bus station at rush hour by a boy several years older than me for absolutely no reason whatsoever. It was a completely unprovoked attack and I was trapped against a one-way door. The adults standing around waiting for their buses to go home from work did absolutely nothing to help me or to stop me from being attacked.
Calling out someone personally to help you will provoke a response a lot faster than generally asking for help. By putting them on the spot, you force them to help you in a public pressure kind of way. Same applies to someone in an accident, for example. If you ask bystanders to dial 911, chances are, no one will. If you point out someone and tell them to call 911, they'll be much more likely to call.
An addict wanted money from me downtown, but I literally had nothing but my clothes on me. So I said, "Sorry man," all out. Dude lumbers towards me slowly, pushes me over, and stabbed me in the thigh with a Swiss Army knife. I booked it to the hospital for stitches. Didn't hurt until I actually looked at it. Adrenaline didn't stop pumping for a very long time. Edit. Lot of people asking, why didn't you run if he was lumbering towards you? I was 13, he was a full-grown adult, I had a bad haircut, he pulled a knife on me, I froze in fear. I'm not sure it was the most terrifying thing that happened to me, but it was the most terrifying thing that happened to me at that point in my life that I was about 11, in Cape Town, South Africa, visiting family that my parents were walking in front of me, and I was walking with my little cousin directly behind them. We were in a shopping mall, Tiger Valley Center for any South Africans out there. Anyway, I think my parents had stopped to get some money out of an ATM, and my cousin were just being silly, as you do at that age. This guy, maybe in his mid-20s, sat across from us on a bench, pointed at us, then my parents, and then dragged his finger along his neck. He then pulled open his jacket, and pulled a gun out of a pocket that I don't know if that was a real gun, and I didn't care to find out. I told my parents immediately, and we kind of circulated the security personnel before eventually leaving. Was a bit of an uncomfortable situation. Many years ago, I was just about to walk into the restaurant where I was the assistant manager, when I was approached by this huge guy who was all smiles and generally gave across this body language of being friendly, sorry but I need to ask you something, kinda way. Next thing I knew, he was screaming at me about some friend I hadn't seen in a while. Turns out my friend had stolen some weed off this dodgy guy, and my name had come up for some reason. Right there in the middle of a busy road in a busy city, he pulled out a Stanley knife and told me he was going to cut my throat with it if I didn't give him his 350-pound right there. I still don't remember exactly what I said to him, but he left, told me he was going to kill me if he ever saw me again, and I went into work. I was 10 or maybe 12 years old. My mom took me to the mall so she could go to the Target. There was a baseball card/comic book store right next to the Target, and while she shopped I got to go look at the collectibles. While I was looking at the cards in the case, a guy came in. He looked around for a minute, then approached me and asked if I liked baseball cards. I said that I did, and he said he had a Babe Ruth card in his van and asked if I would like to see it. We were right at the counter and the clerk was right there, but I got a real creepy vibe from this guy. I said no and left the store to go back to Target and find my mom. I looked behind me as I walked into Target and, sure enough, he was following me. I was starting to get a little scared, so I turned into the women's underwear aisle, thinking he wouldn't follow me. He kept after me until I finally found my mom. I never told her about it because I didn't want to scare her. At the time I thought maybe he wanted to steal my $10, but now I'm pretty sure he wanted more than $10. TLDR, Creepster tried to get me in the mall.